WhatsApp. Make sure that we're online with YouTube. We are. Okay. And it looks like we are ready to go. Okay, everybody. Let's get the guitar and then we'll chant. And as we are doing every day, we are chanting the prayers to Lord Nrsingadev because of our great concern for all the devotees and others in Ukraine and Russia, and praying that this conflict will be over very soon. Actually, if we pray enough, Krishna will change the world's fate, not faith. He will change the world's fate and actually end this conflict. Even though it appears to be a long, long conflict, still Krishna can end it. Krishna is God. And so we pray to Krishna in his form as Nrsimha Bhagawan, half man, half lion, who destroys the miscreants and establishes religious principles and protects the devotees. Namaste Narasrinhaya Adana Doyane Hiranyakasi Urvakshaha Chilatam Kanakalaire Ituna Singa Aratona Singo Yato Yami Tona Singa Bakina Singo Hidayana Singo The Singhamadim Shadanam Brapa Joy The Singhamadim Shadanam Brapa Joy The Singhamadim Shadanam Brapa Joy Namaste Narasingaya Anladalad Adayane Hiranyakasi Purvachaha Shilatam Ganakolai Ituna Singa Paratona Singo Yato Yami Tona Singa Bakina Singo, Vidayana Singo, the Singamadim, Shanam Brapa Joy, the Singamadim, Shanam Brapa Joy. Kapakara Kamala, Prorena Kamapu to sing. Dalita, Hiranyakasi Putana Bringa Yesavadrita Nanamuni Rupa Jatakani Sane Jatakani Sane Dalita, Hiranyakasi Mudano, bring Isavatrita, Nanamuni Rupa, Jatakani Sane, Ate Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Ate Hare Krishna, Ate Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parabhacharya, also Teta, Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chalana, the Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON, Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti, Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya, Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, say Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shadwaita Gadadha, Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna, Gopi Gopinath, Sai Kunda Radhakunda, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Ki Jai, Paturanam Ki Jai, Jagadata Sami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dejatarni. So we're going to continue with our study of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. We are on chapter 25 of the Madhya Lila, and the Madhya Lila is dealing with the saving of the residents of Varanasi by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the last chapter in the Madhya Lila, the 25th chapter, and after that we go to the Antya Lila. So let's continue without further ado. So, Om Ganat Timidandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshuran Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda. So we're starting with text 44 and chapter, or on the chapter, 25 of the Caitanya Caritamrta. Something happened to your hold on a second. Okay, now it's working. And this is the last chapter, as I mentioned before, in Madhya Lila. So, Vyasa Sutrera Harta Acharya Kariyache Chadana Ehaya Sacha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Vachana The conclusion is that the import of the Vedanta Sutra is covered by the imaginary explanation of Shankaracharya. Whatever Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said is perfectly true. So the person who is speaking here, interestingly enough, is one of the chief disciples of Prakashananda Saraswati, and he may be conflicting his guru at this particular point, but because he's become realized by the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is directly taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so he's realized that Shankaracharya has given the indirect meanings when he's given his interpretation of the Vedanta Sutra, whereas Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given the direct meanings. And when you're interpreting Shastra, one should give the direct meanings preference, or direct meaning preference over the indirect meaning, as long as the direct meaning makes sense. It doesn't contradict common sense. Text 45. Caitanya Goswami ye kahe se mata sara arayata mata se sabachara kara. Whatever meaning Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives is perfect. Any other interpretation is only a distortion. Wow. Etakahi se kare Krishna Sankirtana Shuni Prakashananda Kichu Kahena Vachana. After saying this, the disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati began to chant the holy name of Krishna. Hearing this, Prakashananda Saraswati made the following statement, so he also became converted. Acharyara agraha advaita vada stapite tate sutrartha vyakya kare anyarate. Prakashananda Saraswati said, Shankaracharya was very eager to establish the philosophy of monism, means merging into the absolute truth and losing your personal identity, which is kind of boring, miserable, hellish, according to Prabhupada Saraswati, who said, Kaivalya, not a kayate, merging, or the concept of merging is actually hell. Actually, you can't merge into the Lord, but you have the illusion sometimes that you are merging, just like the green bird appears to be merging into a green tree, a green parrot, merging into a green tree. Therefore, he explained the Vedanta Sutra of Vedanta philosophy in a different way to support monistic philosophy. Bhagavata manile advaitana yaya stapana toiva sava shastra karye kandana. If one accepts the personality of Godhead, the philosophy that maintains that God and the living entity are one cannot be established. Therefore, Shankaracharya argued against and refuted all kinds of revealed scriptures. Boy, he's woken up there. Ye granta kartak chahe swamata stapite shasrera sahajarta nahitan hahite. Anyone who wants to establish his own opinion or philosophy certainly cannot explain any scripture according to the principle of direct interpretation. In other words, people use scriptures to present their own philosophy. And you see this in Christianity, you see this in the Islamic tradition, you see this certainly in Judaism. But that is dishonest. And of course, Prabhupada would comment on this when people use the Bhagavad Gita to try to establish their philosophy. Particularly, he was talking at one time about the philosophy of non-violence. How one would try to probably use the word screw a meaning out. That means like somehow or other, manipulate the Shastra or manipulate the interpretation of the Shastras so it appeared that it meant something different than it actually meant. So anyone who does this cannot use the direct interpretation of Shastra, but they have to use the indirect interpretation, metaphorical interpretation, or whatever type of interpretation they want to use. Mimamsaka kahe Ishwarahaya karmeranga Shankya kahe jagatera prakriti karana prasanga. The Mimamsaka philosophers conclude that if there's a God, he is subject to our fruitive activities. Similarly, the Sankhya philosophers, who analyze the cosmic manifestations, say that the cause of the cosmos is material nature. So, Mimamsaka means like the karma Mimamsa philosophy. Karma Mimamsa philosophy is that everything's controlled by your activities and karma. So, if you want some good result, act nicely. Doesn't matter what God thinks, or if there is a God, or if there's not a God, or there's demigods, or they're not demigods. It doesn't matter. They're all subject to, whoever is there in creation is all subject to karma. And they have to obey the laws of karma. It's the example I often give in that regard is if you want a driver's license in the United States, you just have to follow the law. It's not that the person giving you the driver's license has any sort of discrimination because he just doesn't like your face or something like that, or because you haven't bribed him. Of course, in India, it's a different subject matter. We're not going to talk about that. But karma mimamsa means you act nicely. It doesn't matter. Actually, the word mimamsa means to think very deeply. So then Sankhya philosophy, Sankhya means to count. There's two types of Sankhya philosophy. One type is atheistic Sankhya, which is taught by an atheist named Kapila Dev. And then there's theistic, which is taught, or was taught, by the incarnation of Krishna named Lord Kapila Dev. And so the atheistic philosophy is more or less like modern science. You analyze, of course, the details are different, but in essence it's like modern science. You analyze the material cosmic manifestation, and everything comes from it, including consciousness. Consciousness is an epiphenomena of matter. It's created by a certain combination of matter. And the theistic one is you analyze the cosmic manifestation, and by your analysis you come to the conclusion there is God. I mean, just like I've mentioned many times before, when I observe, I'm not a Sankhya philosopher, theistic or atheistic, but anyway, when I observe this material creation, I am convinced that there is a designer. I mean, just apart from Shastra, apart from my chanting Hare Krishna, apart from my associating with devotees and eating a lot of prasadam, just by looking at the material creation, and the more deeply I analyze the material creation, of course I'm not using the system they use in Sankhya, which is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. But I am, in the active senses, perceptive senses, etc., I am using the system of modern science. And using modern science, the more I see about the material creation, especially the biological forms, of which I am one of them, my body is one of them, then the more I become convinced someone created the thing. It's impossible for the creation to come about simply by chance. It's impossible for these bodies, each and every cell, the complexity, the almost unlimited complexity of each cell, and the information stored in each cell, the DNA and RNA and everything like that, to have come about by chance. It's impossible. Impossible. Even if you have multiverses, that means not verses in the Vedic literature, but multi-universes and unlimited time, you just don't come up with this creation. What is first, chicken or the egg? Anyway, text 51, and now we're talking about Nyaya. Nyaya kahe paramanu haite vishwa hoya mayavade nirvishesha brahmahetu kaya. The followers of Nyaya, the philosophy of logic, maintain the atom is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. So, not exactly. Logic is a little bit different than, let's see, Nyaya, and logic is different than actually that, because you use logic. Nyaya is used in all sorts of branches of the Vedic literature or Vedic understanding. maintain that the atom is the cause of the cosmic, and the Mayavadi philosophers maintain that the impersonal Brahman effulgence is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. And then you have Patanjali. Patanjala kahe Ishwarahaya Swarupa Jnana Vedamate Caitanya Swayam Bhagavan. The Patanjala philosophers, that means those who follow Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, say that when one is self-realized, he understands the Lord. Similarly, according to the Vedas and Vedic principles, the original cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, many followers of Patanjali, they see the Supersoul in the heart and they think, hey, that's me. But at most, they can realize the Supersoul in the heart and not Bhagavan, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chayara Chaya Matavyasa Kaila Avatar Avartana Sesava Sutra Lana Vedanta Varnana. After studying the 6 philosophical theses, Vyasadeva completely summarized them all in the aphorisms of the Vedanta philosophy, or Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Mate Brahma Alkara Nirupana Nirguna Vyatireke Tinho Hayata Saguna. According to Vedanta philosophy, the absolute truth is a person. When the word nirguna, without qualities, is used, it is to be understood that the Lord has attributes that are totally spiritual. So that's just a way of defining spiritual, because guna means, in this particular context, the modes of nature. It can also mean qualities. But in this context, that the word guna is used with the nir in front of it, it means without modes of nature. And that's a negative way of saying transcendental or spiritual. For example, we also have the description of the spiritual world being called Vaikuntha. So Kuntha means anxiety, and Vai means without anxiety. So it's a negative way of describing the spiritual world. Like that. Just like saying, okay, it's not cold. That means it's warmer. Or it's not winter. This is a way of describing it. I am not unhappy. Like double negative. That means I'm either neutral or happy. So anyway, so when you say something is devoid of the modes of nature, there's only one alternative, is Brahman, spiritual. Parama karana yishvara keha nahi mane swaswa matastape paramatra tera kandane. Of the philosophers mentioned, none really cares for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. They are always busy refuting the philosophical theories of others and establishing their own. They are munis. Prabhupada said no one can become a muni unless you actually have your own philosophy. A muni means M-U-N-I. In one sense, it means thoughtful person. Tate chaya darshana haite tattva nahi jane mahajana ye kaise Sachamani. By studying the 6 philosophical theories, one cannot reach the absolute truth. It is therefore our duty to follow the path of the Mahajanas, the authorities. Whatever they say should be accepted as the supreme truth. And of course, there's that famous quote from the Mahabharata, Tarko Pratishta Shuti Na, Vivi Na. One cannot understand the absolute truth by argumentation, nor even by reading the Vedic literatures, and only by Mahajani and Gatasapanta, following the footsteps of the great devotees. Okay, purport. In his Amrita Pravaha Bhasha, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the following summary of the 6 philosophical processes. Prakasananda admitted that Sripad Shankaracharya, being very eager to establish his own philosophy of monism, took shelter of the Vedanta philosophy and tried to explain it in his own way. The fact is, however, that if one accepts the existence of God, one certainly cannot establish the theory of monism. For this reason, Shankaracharya refuted all kinds of Vedic literature that establishes the supremacy of the personality of Godhead. In various ways, Shankaracharya has tried to refute the Vedic literature, doing the same thing the Buddhists did, but in a backhanded way, accepting, like giving lip service to it, but not actually accepting what it says. It's like saying, I really like the Bhagavad Gita and accept the Bhagavad Gita, but I disagree with everything it says. And I have my own interpretation about what it says. Throughout the world, 99% of the philosophers following in the footsteps of Shankaracharya refuse to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, they try to establish their own opinions. It is typical of mundane philosophers to want to reestablish their own opinions and refute those of others. Therefore, one, the Mimamsaka philosophers, following the principles of Jaimini, stress fruitive activity and say if there is a God, I already talked about this, he must be under the laws of fruitive activity. In other words, if one performs his duties very nicely in the material world, God is obliged to give one the desired result. And that goes against the definition of God that we find in the beginning of Bhagavatam. He's Swarat. He's independent. You can do everything nicely, but, God could say, I'm going to do whatever I want. You can say, but I did it nicely. I paid my bills. I chanted all my rounds. I went to Mangalarti. I attended every GBC meeting. I was on Zoom every day. Why don't I have love of God? And then Krishna will reply, my dear fool, my dear Muda, don't you understand? I'm independent. Plus, you didn't do anything with devotion. You did everything to achieve something, and you can't storm the kingdom of God. Remember your friend Robin, who tried to build a staircase to the kingdom of God, to heaven, at least to heaven. And remember, of course, the Tower of Babel from the Bhagavad Gita, not Bhagavad Gita, from the Bible. According to these philosophers, there's no need to become a devotee of God if one strictly follows moral principles. One will be recognized by the Lord who will give the desired reward. Such philosophers do not accept the Vedic principle of Bhakti Yoga. Instead, they give stress to following one's prescribed duty. Now, we're not saying you shouldn't follow your prescribed duty, but you do it with devotion, isn't it? Yat korosi yadasnashi yad hoshi dadas yat tapashashi konti yat kodishwa mararpanam. And whatever you do, whatever you offer should be done offering to Krishna, but with devotion. Two atheistic Sankhya philosophers like Kapila Dev analyze the material elements very scrutinizingly and thereby come to the conclusion that material nature is the cause of everything. They do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the cause of all causes. And I mentioned before this, pretty much like that's pretty much like modern science. Nyaya philosophers like Gautama and Kannada have accepted a combination of atoms as the original cause of creation. That's Nyaya and Vaisheshika. Okay, you have two things. There are actually two. They come in pairs, these different philosophies. So Nyaya simply means logic, and the logic leads to this sort of atomism. But technically speaking, Nyaya and Vaisheshika, they're two different philosophies, or two different, let's say they're parts of the same thing. They're two different parts of the same thing. Gautama and Kannada have accepted a combination of atoms as the original cause of creation. 4. Mayavadi philosophers say that everything is an illusion. Strawberry fields forever. Headed by philosophers like Ashtavakra, they stress the impersonal Brahman effulgence as the cause of everything. So if everything is illusion, what caused us to fall into illusion? What caused God to fall into illusion? What caused Brahman to fall into illusion? They can't answer that. 5. Philosophers following the precepts of Patanjali practice Raja Yoga. Wow. They imagine a form of the absolute truth within many forms. That is their process of self-realization. All five of these philosophies completely reject the predominance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead uh, and strive to establish their own philosophical theories. However, Srila Vyasadeva wrote the Vedanta Sutra and, taking the essence of all Vedic literature, established the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All five kinds of philosophers mentioned above understand that impersonal Brahman is without material qualities, and they believe that when the personality of Godhead appears, he is contaminated and covered by the material qualities. The technical term used is sagun. In other words, he has material qualities. He has guna modes. They speak of sagun Brahman and nirgun Brahman. In other words, Brahman. They're using the word guna to indicate qualities. So they think that Brahman can be misunderstood as sagun, having qualities, but ultimately it's nirgun and has no qualities. But how do the qualities or the differentiation come from something with no qualities? Because we don't have any experience that something with no qualities can produce something with qualities. Anyway, for them, Nirgun Brahman means the impersonal absolute truth without any material qualities. And Sagun Brahman means the absolute truth that accepts the contamination of material qualities. So in other words, Sagun Brahman, according to them, is the absolute truth, which is Nirgun, which gets contaminated. But what causes it to become contaminated? You're positing another substance that's more powerful, that's able to cover Brahman, and therefore Brahman, which means the greatest, is no longer the greatest, so it's a contradiction. So more or less, this kind of philosophical speculation is called Mayavad philosophy. The fact is, however, that the absolute truth never has anything to do with material qualities because he is transcendental, he is always complete, with full spiritual qualities. The five philosophers mentioned above do not accept Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they are very busy refuting the philosophies of other schools. There are 6 kinds of philosophical processes in India. Because Vyasadeva is the Vedic authority, he is known as Veda Vyasa. He is accepted by the devotee. His philosophical explanation of the Vedanta Sutra is accepted by the devotees, as Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, famous verse 15:15, one you should all remember. Sarvasya Chamra Yusantavishto Matak Smritir Gyanam Aponam Chavedasha Sarvara Omeva Vedyo Vedanta Krid Veda Vedeva Chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me, that's Krishna, knowledge and forgetfulness, remembrance, knowledge and forgetfulness come. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. The ultimate goal of studying all Vedic literatures is the acceptance of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God. The Krishna Conscious Movement is propagating the philosophical conclusion of Srila Vyasadeva and following other great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami Nimbarka, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these are the modern acharyas of the different sampradayas. And this is the verse actually I just made reference to from the Mahabharata. Tarko patishtashtutayo vibhinnana shaurishirasya matam nabinnam dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajanayena gata sapanta. So basically, one can't understand the absolute truth by studying the Vedas, which are multi-branched, or by argumentation, nor by talking to the rishis, because everyone has their own opinion. This dharma, or the truth, is hidden, guhayam, is hidden in the hearts of these great devotees. Therefore, one has to follow in their footsteps. And let's see this translation. Dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, as the Shastras confirm, one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajanas advocate. Mahajana means great pure devotees. Prabhupada is a Mahajana. This is a verse spoken by Yudhisthira Maharaj in the Mahabharata, Vanaparva 313.117. Spoken to Yamaraj, actually. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Vani Amritera Dara Dinhoye Kaye Vastu Se Tattva Sara. The words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are a shower of nectar. Whatever he concludes to be the ultimate truth is indeed the summum bonum of all spiritual knowledge. Great. Esava Vritanta Shune Maharashtriya Brahmana Prabhure Kahite Sukhe Karila Gamana. After hearing all these statements, the Maharashtrian Brahmin very jubilantly went to inform Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hena Kali Mahaprabhu Pancha Nadesnana Karhi Dekite Chaliyachena Bindu Madhava Puri. When the Maharashtrian Brahmin went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord was going to the temple of Bindu Madhava after bathing in the waters of the Pancha Nada. So remember, in the beginning of this chapter, it was the Maharashtrian Brahmin who complained to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Varanasi was filled with these Mayavadis who were blasphemous, and he was begging Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to do something about it because the Maharashtrian Brahmin said, I have to live the rest of my life in this place. So I don't want to be surrounded by rascals. Pate se viprasaba pratanta kahila shuri Mahaprabhu sukhe shat hasila. While the Lord was on his way, the Maharashtrian Brahmin informed him about the incident that took place in the camp of Prakashananda Saraswati. Hearing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled happily. Madhava Sundarya Deki Avishtahila Anganete Hasi Preme Nachite Lakila. Upon reaching the temple of Bindu Madhava, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing the beauty of Lord Bindu Madhava, became overwhelmed with ecstatic love. He then began to dance in the courtyard of the temple. Shekara Paramananda Tapana Sanatana Chari Jana Milikare Nama Sankirtan. There were 4 people accompanying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and these were Chandrasekhara Paramananda Kirtanaya, Tapan Mishra, and Sanatana Goswami. They were all chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in the following way. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Dhram Shri Madhu Sudan. They chanted Hare Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Ram Shri Madhu Sudan. Prabhupada said this is another way of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The meaning is as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. He is the descendant of the Yadu family. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Gopal Govinda Ram and Sri Madhusudan. Wow. Chodikete Lakshaloka Bale Hari Huri Utila Mangala Dhwani Swarga Marcha Bori. In all directions, hundreds of thousands of people began to chant, Hari, Hari. Thus there arose a tumultuous and auspicious sound filling the entire universe. Nikate Hare Dwani Shuni Parakashananda Dekite Kotuke Ailalana Shisha Vrinda. When Prakashananda Saraswati, who was standing nearby, heard this tumultuous chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, he and his disciples immediately came to see the Lord. Nidekya Prabhura Nritya Prema Dehera Madhuri Shishya Gana Sange Se Bale Huri Huri. When Prakashananda Saraswati saw the Lord, he and his disciples also joined the chanting with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prakashananda Saraswati was charmed by the Lord's dancing and ecstatic love and by the transcendental beauty of his body. Kampa Swarabhanga Sveda Vivarna Stamba. These are symptoms of ecstasy. Ashrudaraya Vijay Lokapulaka Katamba. Ecstatic spiritual transformations began to take place in the Lord's body. His body trembled and his voice faltered. He perspired, turned pale, and wept a constant flow of tears, which wet all the people standing there. The eruptions on the Lord's body appeared like kadamba flowers. Harshadanya Chapalyani Sanchari Vikara Deki Kashivasi Lokera Hoila Chamatkara. All the people were astonished to see the Lord's jubilation and humility, and to hear him talk in ecstasy. Indeed, all the residents of Benares, Kashi, saw the bodily transformations and were astonished. Loka Sangata Teke Prapuravaya Yabe Haila Sanyasiragana Teke Dracha Sambadhila. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu regained his external consciousness, he saw that many Mayavadi sannyasis and other people were gathered there. He therefore suspended his dancing for the time being. Prakashanandera Prabhu Vandila Charana Prakashananda Asi Tandra Dahrila Charana. After stopping the kirtan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is a great example of humility, offered prayers unto the feet of Prakashananda Saraswati. At this time, Prakashananda Saraswati immediately came forward and clasped the Lord's lotus feet. Prabhu Kahi, Tumi Jagat Guru, Pujatama, Ami Tamara Nahi, Shishyara Shisha Sama. When Prakashananda Saraswati caught hold of the Lord's lotus feet, the Lord said, "My dear sir, you are the spiritual master of the whole world. Therefore, you are most worshipable. As far as I am concerned, I'm not even on the level of the disciple of your disciple." And actually, my buddy sannyasis, generally they call themselves Jagat Gurus. Prabhupada would sometimes say that they even travel outside of India, or outside of their area in India or their village. Jagat Guru means world guru. Mayavadi sannyasis, Prabhupada says the same thing, generally call themselves Jagat Guru, the spiritual master of the whole world. Many consider themselves worshipable by everyone, although they do not even go outside India or their own district. Actually, Prabhupada said exactly what I was saying. I must be a good disciple then. Out of his great magnanimity and humility, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu presented himself as a subordinate disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati. Shrestana Kene Kara Hinera Vandana Amara Saranasha Haya Tumi Brahma Sama. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, "You are a great spiritually advanced personality, and therefore you cannot worship a person like me. I am far inferior. If you do so, my spiritual power will be diminished, for you are as good as the impersonal Brahman. Yadyapi tamare sava Brahma samavase loka shikshalagayache karite na I say." My dear sir, for you, everyone is on the level of impersonal Brahman, but for the enlightenment of people in general, you should not behave in that way. Tenho kahe tamara purve ninda aparada ye karila tamara charana sparshe savakshaya gela. Prakashananda Saraswati replied, "Formerly I had committed many offenses against you by blaspheming you. But now the effects of my offenses are counteracted by my touching your lotus feet." There's some mention that at one particular time he had leprosy because of his offenses. At least that appears to be in the past. Jivan mukta api punar yanti sangsara vasanam yadyachinta mahashakto magavatya paradina. If a person considered liberated in this life commits offenses against the reservoir of inconceivable potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he will again fall down and desire the material atmosphere for material enjoyment. That's actually what happens. If you commit offenses, then your material desires overwhelm you and your chanting of japa becomes very, very difficult. Your taste for hearing and chanting becomes diminished almost to nil, depending upon the severity of your offense. Savai Bhagavata Srimat. That's why the first offense is to avoid, or what you're supposed to do according to the first offense is, or avoiding the first offense, avoiding blaspheming devotees of the Lord, those who have dedicated to themselves to propagating the holy name of the Lord. Savai Bhagavata Srimat Padasparsha Hatat Shubha Vijay Sharpa Sarpa Vapuritva Rupam Bijadararchitam. Being touched by the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, that serpent was immediately freed from the reactions of his sinful life. Thus the serpent gave up his body and assumed the body of a beautiful Vidyadhara demigod. So that's from the Bhagavatam. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:34-9. Inhabitants of Vrindavan, under the leadership of Nanda Maharaj, once went to the bank of the Saraswati on a pilgrimage. Nanda Maharaj was fasting. He lay down near the forest. At that time, a serpent, who was formerly cursed by Angirasa Rishi, appeared. This serpent had formerly been named Sudarshana, and he had belonged to the Vidyadhara planet. However, because he joked with the rishi, he was condemned to take on the body of a big snake. When the serpent attacked Nanda Maharaj began to call, "Krishna, help!" Krishna immediately appeared and began to kick the serpent with his lotus feet. Due to being touched by the Lord's lotus feet, the serpent was immediately freed from the reactions of his sinful life. Being freed, he again assumed his original form of Sudarshana, the Vidyadhara. So, of course, Prakashananda Saraswati is actually comparing himself to the serpent, who was very dangerous and envious, and then somehow or other, by getting the Lord's lotus feet and the mercy of the Lord, he became purified and freed from his venom. Prabhukai Vishnu Vishnu Amik Shudra Jivahina Jive Vishnu Mani E Aparada Chinha. When Prakashananda Saraswati supported himself by quoting the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu immediately protested by uttering the holy name of Lord Vishnu. The Lord then presented himself as a most fallen living entity, and he said, if someone accepts a fallen conditioned soul as Vishnu, Bhagavan, or an incarnation, he commits a great offense. Oh, purport here. Although the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to teach us a lesson, he nonetheless denied belonging to the Vishnu category. Unfortunately, there are many so-called Vishnu incarnations in this age of Kali. People do not know that posing oneself as an incarnation is most offensive. People should not accept an ordinary man as an incarnation of God, for this also is a very great offense. So we went to text 78 today, and tomorrow we'll continue with 79 in this particular chapter. Yeah, tomorrow. Okay, so now we will stop sharing. And for those of you who are inquisitive, we are allowing you to ask questions by my mercy. So, Mr. Gopal, you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Please accept my obeisance, Shila Gurudev. Earlier you said...
What if I say no, I don't accept your obeisance? Anyway, so yeah, okay.
It's a request. You are free to do anything.
All right, yeah, I know, I accept. I have to. So, all right, so go ahead.
It's funny you say that, because that's the crux of my question. You said earlier that you can chant all your rounds, go to all the morning programs, attend all the GBC meetings, do everything, and then you can't demand to get love of Godhead from Krishna. Krishna is independent. He can do whatever he likes and give you or not give you.
Yes.
So, and then you went on to say that whatever you did, perhaps you didn't do it with devotion. So if you don't have devotion, how can Krishna fault you for not giving you devotion? That doesn't seem...
That's actually interesting. But first of all, Krishna doesn't give you devotion. That's the first point. Devotion
That
or
bhakti,
bhakti
maybe.
independent. Bhakti comes from Krishna's devotees. So if you want devotion, then you have to be devoted to a devotee. Krishna says, one who says he is my devotee is not my devotee, but one who says he or she is a devotee of my devotee is my devotee. And then
Mm.
Krishna, the point is Krishna's independent, but he voluntarily allows himself to be controlled by his devotees. Uh, so therefore, if you really want to become Krishna conscious, then you get the mercy of Krishna's devotee, such as Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada or any pure soul. And then Krishna say Tamar, Krishna Dite Par, Krishna belongs to the devotee. So then you'll get Krishna consciousness. But still, Krishna's independent, but he's given that right to the pure devotee to give you bhakti. But also, even if you do get bhakti, it's not that things materially will necessarily work out for you. You know, you may get bhakti because you get Krishna's mercy, but it's not that you will necessarily start shaking in ecstasy the next moment. Or it's not necessarily true that everything will go nicely in your life materially. In fact, everything may go topsy-turvy. Krishna says, Yashaham anugunami rishe tadanam shanai. Sometimes for those who I favor, I take away things. And so Krishna puts us in situations that are sometimes painful, even if you have bhakti, so that we can carry out his mission and so that we can become humble. Humility is very hard to come by. Uh, very, very hard to come by. And so Lord Caitanya, in this particular chapter of the Caitanya Caritamrta, was manifesting his great humility uh, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shanadapi, Sunichina, Sarorapi, Ishana, Manida, Manadena, Kirtaniya, Sadahari. One has to be more tolerant than the tree devoid of all sense of all or desire for false prestige. Ready to offer all respects to others. It's hard to be humble. And then when you're humble, then you can actually be free of the attractive features in this world. Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam Va, Jagadisha, Kamaye, Mama Janmani, Janmani, Shure, Bhavatad Bhakti, Hoit, Gitwaye. Okay?
Perfect answer. Thank you.
Okay, and next is my teacher, Urmila, or don't want to say mother, because that's not politically correct. So, Urmila
Whatever.
Devi,
I'm just
Bobby,
wondering about the relationship you talked about between sadhana practice and offenses. I mean, we see some people who objectively are very offensive, and yet they're very strict in their sadhana.
yeah.
I mean, we think about Ramchandra Puri and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but even people we know in our lives, and then we see people who are really like inoffensive, but they struggle with their sadhana. And also, does it mean if a person is struggling with their sadhana that necessarily means that they're committing offenses? And what I'm unclear about the
Well, all
relationship
right,
between
let me take
this.
your last question first. It doesn't mean that they're committing offenses if they're not so strict with their sadhana. It may be they're just a little complacent. Of course, complacency is a sort of offense, but it's not like a super serious offense. It's like the offense of inattentive chanting, which actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur surrounds the other ones. But sometimes we find people who are very strict, another aspect of your question, very strict in their sadhana, but they're doing that because of false prestige, or they're doing that, there may be other motives. They're doing that to impress people, or they may be doing that because it's habits. You know, I do a lot of things because it's a habit that has nothing to do with my internal life. And I'm not talking about my sadhana. Hopefully, my sadhana is done because I have some taste for the holy name. But the symptoms of advancement, not only that one, what Goranga Balite Habi Pulaka Sharir, but that one actually overcomes the anarthas. So if one is not overcoming the anarthas, or diminishing them at least, then you're not, it's not you, of course. Someone is not becoming very advanced. So there may be, in other words, there may be reasons why someone is extremely strict that has nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. I mean, you see a lot of people in different religions who are very, very ritualistic. I mean, you can basically dot your I's and cross your T's. I mean, they do it. And, but they're just like, I mean, maybe obsessive compulsive. That may be a reason. I'm not saying the people who are very strict are obsessive compulsive. Some of them maybe have pure devotion. But if someone is committing offenses and at the same time they're being very strict, then there's some other reason that is motivating them, some other cause that is motivating them to be very strict. And it may be something that I didn't even think of. You know, it could be obsessive compulsive, it could be to impress others, it could be because that way they keep their position in the Krishna consciousness movement. You know, because if I don't do this, then what? You know, I can't be GBC anymore. if I don't do this, then no one else will go to Mangalarti. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, I often think that I have to go to Mangalarti because if I don't, other devotees will take the opportunity and not go. So I'm doing, you know, I would say part of the reason I go to Mangalarti, I'm so strict in spite of in addition to my great bhakti, is that I'm trying to not give people an excuse to be lax in their devotional service, but still they don't go, you know. I don't know how effective it is. Anyway, so I hope that answered your question. All right, thank you for your question. Praneshra, you're the last one who gets to ask a question. So what's your question? It's the middle of the night. I can't hear you.
Yeah, Gurudev, my question is like Ninda, how it affect to the bhakti?
How does one affect the bhakti? What?
Ninda like to blaspheme.
Oh, Ninda. Oh,
Yes.
Ninda. Sadhu Ninda. How does it affect the bhakti? It makes our taste become second rate, third rate, or 10th rate. It's interesting how sometimes you skip from first rate, second rate, third rate to 10th. You don't go through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we lose the taste. Because the taste for hearing and chanting comes from pleasing Krishna's devotees, because Krishna's devotees have bhakti. And so bhakti will flee from our hearts if we offend the devotees. So the cure for this is to, of course, apologize if you offended devotees and then go serve the devotees. So Gopal says, we may not go to Mangalarti, but by seeing your example, at least we feel ashamed. That's actually funny. I hope if you feel really ashamed, then you'll actually do it. So anyway, one has to be very careful of sadhu ninda, because one's attachment to hearing and chanting will become diminished. One may still hear and chant. This is an interesting thing based upon the question Nirmala raised. One may still hear and chant, and ostensibly everything may look all right, but their motivation, which is internal, it's not for us to guess, but their motivation may be really like mundane. I mean, one can have so many mundane motivations for doing spiritual activities. You know, I mean, I'm going to tell you a funny story. When I first started coming to the temple, my motivation for going to class was the prasadam that was there after the class. I thought, you know, it's just not the right thing to go to simply come up and show up for prasadam. So out of etiquette, I attended class. So that was my motivation. Not anymore, you know. Now I got my own kitchen, so I'm not dependent on attending class. So one more question. Okay, Gaurahari. Quick question because it's getting late.
Please accept my obeisances or growth to Srila Prabhupada. My question is concerning the rasa dance. And it's in terms of time. How long did it last? Because
A
I
whole
know
night,
that
a whole night of
Lord
Lord
Chaitanya.
Brahma. It lasted a
I
whole
beg.
night of Lord Brahma.
Oh my God! So that's about 8 hours.
8 hours of Lord Brahma or 12 hours of Lord
Oh,
Brahma.
okay, 8 hours. Okay, 8 hours of a Lord Brahma. I hear you. Okay, okay. And because my question was because I know Lord Chaitanya danced for about 8 hours, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that
Actually, more
correct?
than that. He had one time, I think it was 72 hours he danced for or something. Or that was for
Oh,
Krishna Pandit. That was one of his devotees.
yes, I see. I see. All right.
Okay, good
Wow.
question. Okay, we're going to end the class now. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Sorry, I can't take any more questions. It is time. Krishna says, time I am, and I've come to destroy
The,
it.
the final question.
Oh, no. Yes, what is it? Real quickly, Govinda.
Please accept my humble obeisances, all goes to Prabhupada.
Okay, quick.
It's a healthy question, a healthy discussion, but my point is there is some starting impetus, whatever it is. Initially, we start with Janakena Prakarana Mano Krishna Niveshayat, Rupa Goswami Pad says.
Yes.
So, some or other one must associate with Lord Krishna through the devotees, holy name. Now, Dhruva Maharaj's life, I was thinking, he had a selfish motive, but he ended up with Vaikuntha, the selflessness.
That's fine.
So, what if somebody has, still we should encourage them because eventually they will end up. I mean, Dhruva
That's
Maharaj may
right.
have.
That's right. But what I was talking about was that if someone has a selfish motive and is committing offenses, that's the danger. No, if someone
That's
just has a selfish motive and they're doing bhakti, that's fine. They'll get purified. But the point is, the question that was raised by Irmila was how can one be very strict and still be committing offenses? And my point was that sometimes their motive is impure, and that was from a different angle, that particular answer.
Thank you, Maharaj. I love your answer always. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Lovely. No, just keep those donations coming in. All right. All right. On that happy note, we'll see everybody later. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.